Sarah Martinez had always been different from other girls her age. While her classmates worried about makeup and dating, she spent her afternoons at the local boxing gym, throwing punches at heavy bags until her knuckles bled through the wraps. Her father, a retired Marine, had taught her that strength wasn't just about muscles. It was about never backing down, no matter how scared you felt inside. Growing up in a rough neighborhood in East LA, Sarah learned early that weakness was a luxury she couldn't afford. When she was 12, 3 older boys cornered her after school demanding her lunch money. Instead of crying or running, she broke the leader's nose with a right hook her father had taught her. The principal suspended her for 3 days, but those boys never bothered her again. More importantly, word spread quickly. Sarah Martinez wasn't someone to mess with. Her childhood wasn't easy. Her mother worked double shifts as a nurse to keep food on the table, while her father struggled with PTSD from his tours overseas. Some nights, Sarah would find him sitting alone in the dark, staring at nothing, lost in memories of battles she couldn't understand. During those moments, she would sit beside him quietly, her small hand on his shoulder, knowing that sometimes presence meant more than words. The decision to join the military came naturally. At 18, fresh out of high school, Sarah walked into the Navy recruiter's office with determination burning in her eyes. The recruiter, Petty Officer Johnson, looked at her skeptically. She was barely 5'4" and maybe 120 pounds soaking wet. Most girls her age were thinking about college parties, not combat training. "You sure about this, sweetheart?" Johnson asked, leaning back in his chair. "Military life ain't like the movies." Sarah's jaw tightened. She hated being called sweetheart by strangers. "I'm not here to play games. I want to serve my country." Johnson spent the next hour trying to talk her out of it, suggesting she consider the Coast Guard or maybe a desk job in administration. But Sarah had already made up her mind. She wanted to be where the action was, where she could make a real difference. When he finally realized she wasn't backing down, he slid the papers across the desk. Basic training at Great Lakes was brutal, but Sarah thrived in the structured environment. While other recruits complained about the early morning wake-ups and endless push-ups, she attacked each challenge with fierce determination. Her drill instructors quickly noticed her potential. She could outrun most of the men in her company, and her shooting scores were among the highest in her class. But it was her leadership abilities that really set her apart. When weaker recruits struggled, Sarah stepped in to help without being asked. She stayed after hours to teach proper knot-tying techniques and shared her rations with those who were still hungry after meals. Her bunk was always inspection-ready. Her uniform perfectly pressed, her boots shined to mirror perfection. "Martinez has something special," her drill instructor told his supervisor one evening. "Most recruits are just trying to survive. She's already thinking like a leader." After graduation, Sarah was assigned to a destroyer in the Pacific Fleet. Ship life was challenging in different ways than boot camp. The quarters were cramped, privacy was non-existent, and being one of only a handful of women on board came with its own set of problems. Some of the male sailors resented her presence, making crude jokes and questioning whether women belonged on combat vessels. Sarah handled the harassment with the same quiet strength she'd learned as a child. She never complained or ran to the officers. Instead, she proved herself through actions. When a fire broke out in the engine room during a training exercise, Sarah was first through the hatch, leading the damage control team while others hesitated. When a fellow sailor fell overboard during rough seas, she was part of the rescue team that pulled him to safety. Slowly, she earned respect. The crude jokes stopped. Her shipmates began coming to her for advice, recognizing her natural leadership abilities. When her department head recommended her for advanced training, it came as no surprise to anyone who had served with her. The idea of trying out for the SEALs came during a port visit in San Diego. Sarah was having a drink at a Navy bar when she overheard a group of sailors talking about the recent policy changes that would allow women to compete for previously male-only positions in special operations. Most of them were laughing about it, making jokes about women trying to keep up with real warriors. "No woman could ever make it through SEAL training," one of them said loudly, clearly wanting to be overheard. "They don't have what it takes." Sarah finished her drink slowly, her mind racing. She had always pushed herself to be the best, to prove that she belonged wherever she chose to serve. The SEALs represented the ultimate challenge, the most elite fighting force in the world. If she could make it through their training, No one would ever question her abilities again. That night, she called her father from her ship's phone. She told him about the conversation at the bar and her crazy idea to try out for the SEALs. She expected him to try to talk her out of it, to tell her it was too dangerous or that she should be satisfied with her current success. Instead, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. When he finally spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. "Your whole life, you've never backed down from a challenge. Don't start now." The application process was grueling. Physical fitness tests, psychological evaluations, background checks that went back to elementary school. Sarah trained harder than she ever had before, pushing her body to its limits and beyond. She ran until her legs felt like rubber, did pull-ups until her arms shook uncontrollably, and practiced swimming until she could barely lift her arms above her head. 3 months later, she received the call. She had been accepted for SEAL training. She would be one of the first women ever to attempt the program, and the pressure was immense. The whole military community would be watching, waiting to see if a woman could truly measure up to the legendary standards of the naval special warfare community. As Sarah packed her gear for the trip to Coronado, California, she thought about the journey that had brought her to this point. From that scared 12-year-old girl who refused to hand over her lunch money to a decorated sailor, about to attempt the most challenging military training in the world, she had never stopped pushing forward. She had no idea that the real test of her character was still ahead, or that a moment of vulnerability would reveal a strength she didn't even know she possessed. All she knew was that she was ready to prove once and for all that she belonged among the elite. The bus ride to Naval Amphibious Base Coronado felt like the longest journey of Sarah's life. As the vehicle wound through the California coastline, she stared out the window at the Pacific Ocean, its endless blue surface both beautiful and intimidating. Somewhere out there in the cold, dark waters, she would be tested in ways she couldn't even imagine. Sitting around her were 23 other candidates, all men, all looking as nervous as she felt. Some tried to make conversation. Others sat in complete silence, lost in their own thoughts. Sarah chose silence. She had learned long ago that actions spoke louder than words, and she would have plenty of opportunities to prove herself in the coming weeks. The Naval Special Warfare Training Center appeared suddenly, its gates imposing and official. As the bus pulled to a stop, Sarah could see groups of instructors waiting, their faces hard and emotionless. These were the men who would decide her fate, who would push her beyond every limit she thought she had. Among them stood Commander James Mitchell, a legend in the SEAL community with over 15 years of special operations experience. Mitchell had mixed feelings about the women being allowed into SEAL training. It wasn't that he doubted their courage or determination. He had served alongside plenty of brave female sailors and Marines. But SEAL training was designed to break people, to find their absolute breaking point and push them past it. The physical demands were brutal, but the mental challenges were even worse. He wondered if the program would need to be modified, and the thought bothered him. Standards were standards for a reason. As the candidates filed off the bus, Mitchell's eyes immediately found Sarah. She was smaller than he had expected, but there was something in the way she carried herself that caught his attention. While the other candidates looked around nervously or tried to joke with each other, she moved with quiet confidence, her eyes focused straight ahead. "Listen up," Mitchell's voice cut through the morning air like a knife. "Welcome to BUDS Basic Underwater Demolition SEAL Training. For the next 6 months, this place will be your world. Some of you think you know what you're getting into. You're wrong." He began walking along the line of candidates, studying each face. "Most of you will quit. Not because you're weak, not because you're cowards, but because this program will find every weakness you have and exploit it. We will break you down completely before we build you back up." When he reached Sarah, Mitchell paused. "Martinez, isn't it? First woman to make it this far in the program." "Yes, sir," Sarah replied, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "You understand that there will be no special treatment? No modifications to the program because of your gender?" "I wouldn't want any, sir." Mitchell studied her for a long moment, then moved on. But Sarah caught something in his expression, not hostility exactly, but a kind of intense curiosity. She would be an experiment, a test case for whether women could truly handle everything the SEALs demanded. The first week was designed to establish the baseline: physical fitness tests, medical examinations, and endless paperwork. Sarah quickly realized that several of her fellow candidates were already struggling. The runs were longer and faster than anything they had experienced, the calisthenics more demanding than regular military PT. By the end of the week, 3 men had already dropped out. Sarah held her own during the physical challenges, but she noticed the extra attention she received from the instructors. Every exercise was scrutinized, every performance measured not just against the standards but against the unspoken question of whether a woman could really belong here. She tried not to let it bother her, focusing instead on her own performance. The psychological pressure was intense in ways she hadn't anticipated. The instructors weren't just testing physical capabilities, they were probing for mental weaknesses, for buttons they could push when the real suffering began. They studied each candidate like scientists examining specimens, looking for the cracks that could be exploited later. During the second week, the real training began. Days started at 5 a.m. with a 4-mile run on the beach, followed by hours of calisthenics, swimming, and obstacle courses. The infamous grinder, a concrete courtyard where much of the physical training took place, became Sarah's second home. Hour after hour, she performed push-ups, sit-ups, and jumping jacks until her muscles screamed in protest. But it was the water training that truly separated the serious candidates from the hopefuls. The Pacific Ocean off Coronado was cold year-round, and the instructors seemed to take particular pleasure in making the trainees spend as much time as possible in its icy embrace. Swimming in full gear, treading water for hours at a time, and practicing underwater knot tying while holding their breath, these exercises pushed everyone to their limits. Sarah discovered that she had a natural advantage in the water. Her smaller size meant she moved more efficiently through the waves, and her years of competitive swimming in high school served her well. While some of the larger men struggled with the swimming portions, she glided through the water with surprising speed and grace. The first major test came during the third week, a timed swim that had to be completed in full gear. The distance was 2 miles in open ocean and the cutoff time was strict. Several candidates had already failed this test in previous classes, ending their SEAL dreams permanently. As Sarah slipped into the cold Pacific water, she felt the familiar shock of the temperature against her skin. The weight of her gear tried to pull her down, but she had trained for this moment. She found her rhythm quickly, her strokes steady and efficient. Around her, she could hear other candidates struggling, their breathing becoming labored as they fought against the current. Halfway through the swim, Sarah realized she was ahead of most of the group. The instructors in the safety boats were watching her closely, timing her progress. She could see surprise on some of their faces. They hadn't expected the smallest candidate to be leading the pack. She finished the swim in well under the required time, pulling herself onto the beach with energy to spare, while several of her fellow candidates barely made it within the cutoff. That night, as she cleaned her gear and prepared for the next day's challenges, Sarah overheard 2 instructors talking. "The Martinez girl is surprising," one said. "Stronger swimmer than half the men." "Don't get too excited," the other replied. "Swimming is just one piece of the puzzle. Wait until Hell Week. That's when we'll see what she's really made of." Hell Week, 5.5 days of continuous training with maybe 4 hours of sleep total. Sarah had heard stories about it from other SEALs, tales of hallucinations, hypothermia, and complete physical breakdown. It was the make or break point of the entire program, where the majority of candidates finally reached their breaking point and rang the bell that signaled their withdrawal from training. As Sarah lay in her narrow bunk that night, listening to the sound of the ocean through her window, she thought about how far she had come. The scared girl from East LA seemed like a different person now. But she knew the real test was still ahead. Hell Week would push her beyond anything she had ever experienced, and she would either emerge stronger or join the long list of candidates who had tried and failed to become SEALs. She closed her eyes and tried to get what rest she could. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to prove herself. And somewhere in the back of her mind, she wondered what Commander Mitchell was thinking as he watched her progress through the program that had broken so many strong men before her. The weeks following Hell Week brought a different kind of challenge. The surviving candidates had proven they could endure extreme physical hardship, but now the focus shifted to technical skills, diving, demolitions, weapons training, and tactical operations. Sarah threw herself into these new challenges with the same determination that had carried her through the darkest moments of Hell Week. She discovered that she had a natural aptitude for demolitions work. The precise calculations required for explosive charges, the careful attention to detail, and the steady hands needed for delicate work all suited her perfectly. While some of the other candidates struggled with the mathematical aspects of the training, Sarah found herself helping them understand the concepts during study sessions. Commander Mitchell continued to observe her progress with growing respect. Her performance in Hell Week had impressed him, but it was her behavior afterward that truly caught his attention. Rather than becoming arrogant or exclusive after surviving the program's most notorious challenge, she became more generous with her help and support for struggling classmates. The diving phase of training brought new tests. Deep-sea navigation, underwater demolitions, and combat swimming in full gear pushed everyone to their limits in different ways than Hell Week had. The ocean became both classroom and testing ground, its depths hiding challenges that could kill the unwary or unprepared. Sarah's small size continued to be an advantage in the water. She moved through the depths with an efficiency that amazed her instructors, and her air consumption was significantly lower than her male counterparts, allowing her to stay underwater longer during crucial exercises. But it was her coolness under pressure that really set her apart. During one particularly challenging dive, Rodriguez got tangled in old fishing nets at 60 feet underwater. Panic was the enemy in such situations. It led to rapid air consumption, poor decision-making, and potentially fatal mistakes. While other candidates might have rushed to the surface for help, Sarah calmly assessed the situation and worked methodically to free her teammate, using her diving knife to cut him loose from the entangling lines. "Martinez saved my life down there," Rodriguez told Mitchell after the dive. Didn't panic, didn't hesitate. Just did what needed to be done. As the training progressed, Sarah began to notice changes in how the other candidates treated her. The initial skepticism and occasional resentment had given way to genuine respect. She was no longer the woman trying to be a SEAL. She was simply Martinez, a reliable teammate who could be counted on when things got difficult. But the pressure of being the first woman in the program never completely disappeared. Sarah knew that every mistake she made would be magnified, every moment of weakness scrutinized for evidence that women didn't belong in special operations. The weight of representing her entire gender was exhausting in ways that the physical training couldn't match. 3 months into the program, a new challenge arrived that would test everyone in unexpected ways. The candidates were told they would participate in a joint training exercise with regular Navy units, a chance to demonstrate their skills and practice working with conventional forces. What they weren't told was that this exercise would involve a moment of vulnerability that Sarah had been dreading since the day she arrived at Coronado. The scenario was a simulated prisoner of war situation. The candidates would be captured by opposing forces and subjected to interrogation techniques designed to test their resistance to pressure. It was a standard part of SEAL training, meant to prepare them for the possibility of being caught behind enemy lines in real combat situations. Sarah understood the importance of this training, but she also knew it would involve something she had managed to avoid throughout her military career, being forced to remove her uniform in front of others. The scenario called for prisoners to be stripped and subjected to various forms of psychological pressure, including humiliation and exposure. For weeks, Sarah had been able to maintain her privacy through careful planning and quick changes in bathroom stalls. Her fellow candidates had no idea about the extensive tattoo work that covered her back. The beautiful but deeply personal piece of art that told a story she had never shared with anyone in the military. The tattoo was a memorial to her younger brother Miguel, who had been killed in a gang shooting when Sarah was 19. The design was intricate and stunning, a pair of angel wings that stretched across her entire back, with Miguel's name and dates inscribed in elegant script between them. Below the wings, in smaller text, was a quote in Spanish that had been his favorite saying, "La familia es todo," family is everything. Sarah had gotten the tattoo during a dark period after Miguel's death, when she was struggling with guilt and grief. He had been walking home from his job at a local grocery store when he was caught in crossfire between rival gangs. Sarah blamed herself for not being there to protect him, for pursuing her own dreams while her little brother navigated the dangerous streets alone. The tattoo had been her way of carrying Miguel with her, of ensuring that his memory would never fade. But it was also deeply private, a part of her soul that she wasn't ready to share with the world. The idea of having it exposed and possibly mocked or questioned by instructors and fellow candidates filled her with dread. As the day of the exercise approached, Sarah considered her options. She could try to find an excuse to miss the training, but that would likely mean being dropped from the program. She could request a private meeting with Commander Mitchell to explain the situation, but that might come across as asking for special treatment, something she had sworn she would never do. In the end, she decided to face the situation head-on. Just as she had faced every other challenge in her life, she would endure whatever came and deal with the consequences afterward. The memorial to Miguel was part of who she was, and if that meant facing judgment or questions from others, so be it. The exercise began at dawn on a cold Tuesday morning. The candidates were transported to a remote training facility, where they would face their mock captors, experienced instructors trained in interrogation techniques. Sarah's stomach churned as she realized that the moment she had been dreading was only hours away. The capture was realistic and sudden. Armed instructors in enemy uniforms ambushed the candidates during what was supposed to be a routine patrol exercise. Sarah found herself with a hood over her head, hands zip-tied behind her back, being roughly handled and shouted at in a foreign language. She was separated from her teammates and placed in a small, dark cell where she waited for what felt like hours. The isolation was part of the psychological pressure, meant to build anxiety and uncertainty about what was coming next. Sarah used the time to center herself, focusing on breathing techniques she had learned during her years of training. When they finally came for her, Sarah was led into a brightly lit room where several instructors waited. Commander Mitchell was among them, though he was dressed as one of the enemy interrogators. His presence both comforted and worried her. He would see everything that was about to happen. "Remove your clothes," one of the instructors commanded in accented English, playing the role of an enemy soldier. "Everything now." Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she began to comply. She had known this moment was coming, had prepared herself for it mentally, but the reality was still overwhelming. As she removed her uniform top and reached for her undershirt, she caught Commander Mitchell's eye. His expression was professionally neutral, but she thought she saw a flash of understanding there. With a deep breath, Sarah pulled off her undershirt and turned around, exposing her back to the room full of instructors and trainees. The reaction was immediate and complete silence. Even the role-playing enemy interrogators stopped their performance for a moment, stunned by the beauty and artistry of what they saw. The angel wings seemed to shimmer in the bright lights, their intricate featherwork so detailed it looked almost three-dimensional. Miguel's name stood out in beautiful script, surrounded by symbols and text that spoke of love, loss, and remembrance. It was clearly the work of a master artist, not some impulsive decision made in a moment of rebellion. Commander Mitchell stared at the tattoo in complete silence, his mind racing to understand what he was seeing. This wasn't gang ink or military bravado. This was art, and it was deeply personal. The craftsmanship alone must have cost thousands of dollars and taken dozens of hours to complete. But more than that, there was something in the design that spoke of grief, of a pain so deep it had been permanently etched into skin and soul. The weeks following Hell Week brought a different kind of challenge. The surviving candidates had proven they could endure extreme physical hardship, but now the focus shifted to technical skills: diving, demolitions, weapons training, and tactical operations. Sarah threw herself into these new challenges with the same determination that had carried her through the darkest moments of Hell Week. She discovered that she had a natural aptitude for demolitions work. The precise calculations required for explosive charges, the careful attention to detail, and the steady hands needed for delicate work all suited her perfectly. While some of the other candidates struggled with the mathematical aspects of the training, Sarah found herself helping them understand the concepts during study sessions. Commander Mitchell continued to observe her progress with growing respect. Her performance in Hell Week had impressed him, but it was her behavior afterward that truly caught his attention. Rather than becoming arrogant or exclusive after surviving the program's most notorious challenge, she became more generous with her help and support for struggling classmates. The diving phase of training brought new tests. Deep-sea navigation, underwater demolitions, and combat swimming in full gear pushed everyone to their limits in different ways than Hell Week had. The ocean became both classroom and testing ground, its depths hiding challenges that could kill the unwary or unprepared. Sarah's small size continued to be an advantage in the water. She moved through the depths with an efficiency that amazed her instructors, and her air consumption was significantly lower than her male counterparts, allowing her to stay underwater longer during crucial exercises. But it was her coolness under pressure that really set her apart. During one particularly challenging dive, Rodriguez got tangled in old fishing nets at 60 feet underwater. Panic was the enemy in such situations. It led to rapid air consumption, poor decision-making, and potentially fatal mistakes. While other candidates might have rushed to the surface for help, Sarah calmly assessed the situation and worked methodically to free her teammate, using her diving knife to cut him loose from the entangling lines. "Martinez saved my life down there," Rodriguez told Mitchell after the dive. "Didn't panic, didn't hesitate. Just did what needed to be done." As the training progressed, Sarah began to notice changes in how the other candidates treated her. The initial skepticism and occasional resentment had given way to genuine respect. She was no longer the woman trying to be a SEAL. She was simply Martinez, a reliable teammate who could be counted on when things got difficult. But the pressure of being the first woman in the program never completely disappeared. Sarah knew that every mistake she made would be magnified, every moment of weakness scrutinized for evidence that women didn't belong in special operations. The weight of representing her entire gender was exhausting in ways that the physical training couldn't match. 3 months into the program, a new challenge arrived that would test everyone in unexpected ways. The candidates were told they would participate in a joint training exercise with regular Navy units, a chance to demonstrate their skills and practice working with conventional forces. What they weren't told was that this exercise would involve a moment of vulnerability that Sarah had been dreading since the day she arrived at Coronado. The scenario was a simulated prisoner of war situation. The candidates would be captured by opposing forces and subjected to interrogation techniques designed to test their resistance to pressure. It was a standard part of SEAL training, meant to prepare them for the possibility of being caught behind enemy lines in real combat situations. Sarah understood the importance of this training, but she also knew it would involve something she had managed to avoid throughout her military career, being forced to remove her uniform in front of others. The scenario called for prisoners to be stripped and subjected to various forms of psychological pressure, including humiliation and exposure. For weeks, Sarah had been able to maintain her privacy through careful planning and quick changes in bathroom stalls. Her fellow candidates had no idea about the extensive tattoo work that covered her back. The beautiful but deeply personal piece of art that told a story she had never shared with anyone in the military. The tattoo was a memorial to her younger brother Miguel, who had been killed in a gang shooting when Sarah was 19. The design was intricate and stunning, a pair of angel wings that stretched across her entire back, with Miguel's name and dates inscribed in elegant script between them. Below the wings, in smaller text, was a quote in Spanish that had been his favorite saying, "La familia es todo," family is everything. Sarah had gotten the tattoo during a dark period after Miguel's death, when she was struggling with guilt and grief. He had been walking home from his job at a local grocery store when he was caught in crossfire between rival gangs. Sarah blamed herself for not being there to protect him, for pursuing her own dreams while her little brother navigated the dangerous streets alone. The tattoo had been her way of carrying Miguel with her, of ensuring that his memory would never fade. But it was also deeply private, a part of her soul that she wasn't ready to share with the world. The idea of having it exposed and possibly mocked or questioned by instructors and fellow candidates filled her with dread. As the day of the exercise approached, Sarah considered her options. She could try to find an excuse to miss the training, but that would likely mean being dropped from the program. She could request a private meeting with Commander Mitchell to explain the situation, but that might come across as asking for special treatment, something she had sworn she would never do. In the end, she decided to face the situation head-on. Just as she had faced every other challenge in her life, she would endure whatever came and deal with the consequences afterward. The memorial to Miguel was part of who she was, and if that meant facing judgment or questions from others, so be it. The exercise began at dawn on a cold Tuesday morning. The candidates were transported to a remote training facility where they would face their mock captors, experienced instructors trained in interrogation techniques. Sarah's stomach churned as she realized that the moment she had been dreading was only hours away. The capture was realistic and sudden. Armed instructors in enemy uniforms ambushed the candidates during what was supposed to be a routine patrol exercise. Sarah found herself with a hood over her head, hands zip-tied behind her back, being roughly handled and shouted at in a foreign language. She was separated from her teammates and placed in a small, dark cell where she waited for what felt like hours. The isolation was part of the psychological pressure, meant to build anxiety and uncertainty about what was coming next. Sarah used the time to center herself, focusing on breathing techniques she had learned during her years of training. When they finally came for her, Sarah was led into a brightly lit room where several instructors waited. Commander Mitchell was among them, though he was dressed as one of the enemy interrogators. His presence both comforted and worried her. He would see everything that was about to happen. "Remove your clothes," one of the instructors commanded in accented English, playing the role of an enemy soldier. "Everything now." Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she began to comply. She had known this moment was coming, had prepared herself for it mentally, but the reality was still overwhelming. As she removed her uniform top and reached for her undershirt, she caught Commander Mitchell's eye. His expression was professionally neutral, but she thought she saw a flash of understanding there. With a deep breath, Sarah pulled off her undershirt and turned around, exposing her back to the room full of instructors and trainees. The reaction was immediate and complete silence. Even the role-playing enemy interrogators stopped their performance for a moment, stunned by the beauty and artistry of what they saw. The angel wings seemed to shimmer in the bright lights, their intricate featherwork so detailed it looked almost three-dimensional. Miguel's name stood out in beautiful script, surrounded by symbols and text that spoke of love, loss, and remembrance. It was clearly the work of a master artist, not some impulsive decision made in a moment of rebellion. Commander Mitchell stared at the tattoo in complete silence, his mind racing to understand what he was seeing. This wasn't gang ink or military bravado. This was art, and it was deeply personal. The craftsmanship alone must have cost thousands of dollars and taken dozens of hours to complete. But more than that, there was something in the design that spoke of grief, of a pain so deep it had been permanently etched into skin and soul. The silence in the interrogation room stretched for what felt like an eternity. Sarah stood with her back exposed to the assembled instructors, feeling more vulnerable than she ever had during Hell Week or any physical challenge. The angel wings. Tattoo seemed to pulse with her heartbeat. Miguel's name a permanent reminder of the brother she had failed to protect. Commander Mitchell was the first to break the spell. He cleared his throat and stepped forward, his voice steady but somehow different than before. "Continue with the exercise," he commanded the other instructors, but his tone lacked the harsh edge that had characterized the mock interrogation up to that point. The role-playing resumed, but Sarah could feel that something had fundamentally changed in the room. The other trainees who were present as part of the exercise looked at her with new eyes, not with judgment or mockery, but with a kind of respectful recognition. The instructors, too, seemed to approach their roles with less enthusiasm, as if the raw humanity of what they had witnessed had reminded them that this was about more than just training. Sarah answered their questions with the standard responses. She had been taught name, rank, and service number only. But even as she played her part in the exercise, she was acutely aware that a line had been crossed. Her most private pain was now visible to people who would judge not just her military capabilities, but her character and background. When the exercise finally ended and Sarah was allowed to dress, she moved with deliberate calm, refusing to show how shaken she felt. She pulled on her undershirt and uniform top with practiced efficiency, but she could feel eyes on her back, could sense the whispered conversations that would inevitably follow. Commander Mitchell dismissed the other participants but asked Sarah to remain behind. When they were alone, he studied her face carefully, looking for signs of distress or breakdown. What he saw instead was the same quiet strength that had carried her through every challenge so far, but now tempered with something else. A kind of resigned acceptance that her privacy had been permanently breached. "That's some impressive artwork," Mitchell said finally, his voice carefully neutral. Sarah met his gaze steadily. Thank you, sir. Want to tell me about it? For a moment, Sarah considered deflecting the question or giving a simple, uninformative answer. But something in Mitchell's tone told her that this wasn't idle curiosity or an attempt to find something to use against her. He was asking as one human being to another, recognizing that what he had seen represented something important. My brother Miguel, she said quietly. He was killed 6 years ago. Gang shooting in East LA. Wrong place, wrong time. Mitchell nodded slowly. He had seen enough memorial tattoos during his military career to recognize one, but the artistry and obvious cost of Sarah's tattoo suggested something deeper than a simple remembrance. You blame yourself, he said. It wasn't a question. Sarah's jaw tightened slightly. I was supposed to pick him up from work that night. Had to stay late for training. If I had been there, he might have been killed anyway. Or you both might have been killed. Or I might have been able to protect him. Mitchell was quiet for a long moment, studying the young woman in front of him. He was beginning to understand that her drive to excel, her refusal to quit or accept help, came from something deeper than simple ambition or stubbornness. She was carrying a weight of guilt and responsibility that would have crushed most people, and she was channeling it into a determination to never fail anyone again. Martinez, he said finally, what happened to your brother wasn't your fault, and getting that tattoo doesn't make you weak or unprofessional. It makes you human. Sarah felt something shift inside her chest, a loosening of tension she hadn't even realized she was carrying. Throughout her military career, she had worried that the tattoo would be seen as a sign of gang affiliation or poor judgment. She had hidden it not just for privacy, but out of fear that it would end her dreams of military service. Will this affect my standing in the program, sir? Mitchell shook his head. Your performance speaks for itself. What you choose to put on. Your body is your business as long as it doesn't interfere with your duties. That tattoo tells me more about your character than any evaluation report ever could. The words hit Sarah harder than she expected. For years, she had carried the fear that her memorial to Miguel would be misunderstood, that it would mark her as someone who didn't belong in the professional military world. To hear a respected SEAL commander acknowledge it as a mark of character rather than a liability was overwhelming. Thank you, sir, she managed, her voice slightly thick with emotion. Don't thank me yet, Mitchell said, but there was a hint of warmth in his voice. You've still got months of training ahead and it doesn't get easier from here. As Sarah left the interrogation facility, she found several of her fellow candidates waiting outside. Jackson, Rodriguez, and 3 others had lingered instead of heading back to the barracks with the rest of the group. Their faces showed a mixture of curiosity and concern. You okay, Martinez? Jackson asked. The big Texan had become something of a protective older brother to the whole group, but his concern for Sarah was particularly evident. I'm fine, Sarah replied, but she could see in their eyes that they were processing what they had witnessed. The tattoo had revealed something about her that changed their understanding of who she was and where she came from. Rodriguez stepped forward. That was your brother? Sarah nodded, not trusting herself to speak about Miguel without her voice breaking. I lost my cousin the same way, Rodriguez said quietly. Albuquerque 3 years ago, drive-by shooting. He was just walking to the corner store. The simple acknowledgement of shared experience created an immediate bond. Sarah realized that several of her teammates probably came from similar backgrounds, had similar losses and motivations driving them. The military often attracted people who were running from something or toward something bigger than themselves. As they walked back to the barracks together, the conversation gradually shifted to other topics, but Sarah could feel that something fundamental had changed in the group dynamic. The revelation of her tattoo had humanized her in a way that all her previous achievements couldn't. She was no longer just the first woman trying to make it through SEAL training. She was Sarah Martinez, someone who had known real loss and was fighting to honor her brother's memory through service. Word of the tattoo spread through the instructor cadre within hours. By evening, every staff member at the training facility knew about the angel wings and what they represented. The reaction was mixed, but largely positive. Some of the older instructors Men who had served in combat and lost friends and family members understood the deep meaning behind such a memorial. Chief Petty Officer Williams, a grizzled veteran with 22 years in the SEALs, sought out Commander Mitchell that evening. Williams had been skeptical about women in SEAL training from the beginning, not out of prejudice, but from concern about unit cohesion and physical standards. "Boss, I need to tell you something about the Martinez girl," Williams said as he entered Mitchell's office. Mitchell looked up from his paperwork, preparing for either a complaint or a recommendation for disciplinary action. "I've been watching her since Hell Week," Williams continued. "Today, when she stood there with that ink showing, not trying to hide it or make excuses, that took more courage than most of the physical stuff we put them through." Mitchell nodded. He had been thinking the same thing. "You know what really got to me?" Williams asked. "When the exercise was over and she was getting dressed, I saw her help Rodriguez with his gear. Kid had been struggling with his equipment, and she just quietly fixed it for him. Didn't make a big deal about it, didn't want credit. After what she'd just been through, she was still looking out for her teammates. This was exactly the kind of character assessment that mattered in the SEAL community. Technical skills could be taught, physical conditioning could be developed, but the instinct to put teammates first, especially during moments of personal vulnerability, was something that couldn't be trained. Over the following days, Sarah noticed subtle changes in how she was treated by both instructors and fellow candidates. The respect had always been there, earned through her performance during Hell Week and subsequent training. But now there was an additional layer of understanding, a recognition that she was fighting battles beyond the ones visible in training. Her study group expanded as more candidates sought her help with technical subjects. She found herself becoming an informal leader, not through self-promotion, but through her willingness to share knowledge and support struggling teammates. The tattoo revelation had somehow made her more approachable, more human to people who had previously seen her primarily as a barrier-breaking anomaly. The physical training continued to intensify. Advanced combat swimming, night operations, weapons training, and tactical exercises pushed everyone to their limits in new ways. Sarah continued to excel, but she noticed that the pressure she felt, to be perfect, to never show weakness, had lessened somewhat. The forced vulnerability of the interrogation exercise had paradoxically made her stronger, by allowing her to be more authentic. 3 weeks after the tattoo incident, the candidates faced their next major milestone, a comprehensive evaluation that would determine who advanced to the final phase of training. It involved everything they had learned so far: swimming, diving, weapons proficiency, tactical knowledge, and leadership under pressure. Sarah approached this evaluation with more confidence than she had felt in months. The revelation of her tattoo and the positive reaction it had received had removed a weight she hadn't fully realized she was carrying. She was still the first woman in SEAL training, still representing something larger than herself. But she was also just Sarah Martinez, a warrior with her own story, her own motivations, and her own reasons for refusing to quit. As she prepared her gear for the evaluation exercises, Sarah caught her reflection in the mirror of the equipment room. For the first time since arriving at Coronado, she looked relaxed, at peace with herself and her place in the program. Miguel's memory would always be with her, carried both in her heart and permanently etched on her skin. But now, instead of being a source of hidden shame or vulnerability, it had become a source of visible strength that connected her more deeply to her teammates and her mission. The final evaluation proved to be everything Sarah had expected and more. Over the course of 3 grueling days, the remaining 8 candidates were tested on every skill they had learned during their months at Coronado. The attrition rate had been brutal. From the original 24 candidates who had started the program, only 8 remained, and even they weren't guaranteed to pass this final hurdle. Sarah's performance during the swimming portions was flawless. Her technique had improved dramatically since those early days, and her endurance in the water now matched or exceeded that of her male teammates. During the 2-mile ocean swim in full gear, she finished second overall, her stroke steady and efficient despite the challenging conditions. The weapons training evaluation tested not just marksmanship, but tactical decision-making under pressure. Candidates had to navigate complex scenarios while armed, making split-second choices about when to engage targets and when to hold fire. Sarah's scores were consistently high, her natural steadiness under pressure serving her well in situations that left others hesitating or making costly mistakes. But it was during the leadership portion of the evaluation that Sarah truly distinguished herself. Each candidate was given command of a small team for a simulated mission involving reconnaissance, target identification, and extraction under hostile conditions. The scenario was designed to test their ability to make decisions, communicate effectively, and maintain team cohesion under extreme stress. When Sarah's turn came to lead, she was assigned Rodriguez, Jackson, and 2 other candidates she knew less well: Thompson, a former Army Ranger from Georgia, and Kim, a Navy explosive ordnance disposal specialist from California. The mission briefing was deliberately vague and contained conflicting information, forcing the team leader to make judgment calls with incomplete intelligence. Sarah approached the leadership challenge with the same methodical thinking that had served her throughout training. She gathered her team for a quick briefing, assigned roles based on each person's strengths, and established clear communication protocols. Most importantly, she made it clear that she wanted input from everyone, that their success depended on working as a unit rather than following blind orders. Kim, you take point on identifying any explosive devices, she told the EOD specialist. Thompson, you and Rodriguez handle perimeter security. Jackson, you're with me on target identification. Everyone stays within visual contact, and if anyone sees something that doesn't feel right, speak up immediately. The exercise began in pre-dawn darkness, with the team inserted by boat onto a rocky coastline. Their objective was to locate and photograph a simulated enemy installation while avoiding patrols and electronic surveillance. The instructors had planted numerous obstacles and distractions designed to test the team's decision-making abilities. 20 minutes into the mission, Kim discovered what appeared to be an improvised explosive device blocking their primary route to the target. Standard protocol would have been to find an alternate path, but Sarah recognized that this was likely a test of her willingness to use her team's specialized skills. Kim, how long to neutralize it? She whispered into her radio. 5 minutes, maybe less, came the response. Do it. Everyone else establish security perimeter. It was a calculated risk. Stopping to deal with the device would cost precious time and potentially expose them to enemy patrols. But attempting to find an alternate route might lead them into worse obstacles or cause them to miss their objective entirely. Kim worked with practiced efficiency, and within 4 minutes the device was safe. The team moved forward, reaching their objective ahead of schedule and with enough time to conduct thorough reconnaissance of the target area. But the real test came when they encountered an unexpected complication. During their surveillance of the target, Thompson spotted what appeared to be civilian hostages being held in one of the buildings, something that hadn't been mentioned in their briefing. This was exactly the kind of ethical dilemma that SEAL teams might face in real operations. Sarah had to make a choice: complete their assigned mission of photographing the installation and withdraw, or attempt a rescue that wasn't part of their orders and might compromise the primary objective. She gathered her team for a quick conference, seeking their input while keeping one eye on their time limit. Boss, if those are real hostages, we can't just leave them, Jackson whispered urgently. But if we deviate from mission parameters, we might fail the evaluation, Thompson pointed out pragmatically. Sarah considered the options quickly. In a real combat situation, she would need to weigh mission priorities against humanitarian concerns, considering factors like available resources, risk to her team, and strategic implications. Here she was being tested on her judgment and character as much as her tactical skills. We adapt the mission, she decided. Kim and Rodriguez continue surveillance and photo documentation of the primary target. Thompson and Jackson, with me on hostage assessment and possible extraction. If we can save them without compromising the main objective, we do it. The modified plan worked perfectly. While part of her team completed the original reconnaissance mission, Sarah led a quick but careful assessment of the hostage situation. What they discovered was that the hostages were actually part of the exercise. Instructor, personnel playing roles to test exactly this kind of decision-making. The team completed both objectives and extracted successfully, having demonstrated not just tactical competence but the kind of moral, courage, and adaptive thinking that distinguished true leaders from mere commanders. Commander Mitchell watched the entire exercise from the command post, following Sarah's team through multiple camera angles and radio intercepts. He was impressed not just by her tactical decisions, but by the way she had integrated her team's capabilities and maintained their confidence throughout the mission. "She's got good instincts," Chief Williams observed as they watched the team's extraction. "And knows when to stick to the plan and when to adapt. That's something you can't teach." The formal evaluation results were announced 3 days later. All 8 remaining candidates had passed the technical requirements, but their rankings for potential SEAL team assignment varied significantly based on leadership potential and overall performance. Sarah finished second overall, behind only Thompson, whose previous experience as an Army Ranger had given him advantages in certain tactical areas. But more importantly, her peer evaluations were outstanding. When the other candidates were asked confidentially who they would most want to serve with in a real combat situation, Sarah received more votes than anyone else. The graduation ceremony was small and private, attended only by immediate family members and a few senior officers from the Naval Special Warfare community. Sarah's parents flew in from Los Angeles, their pride evident as they watched their daughter receive her SEAL Trident pin. Her father, the retired Marine who had taught her to fight as a child, had tears in his eyes as Commander Mitchell pinned the golden trident to Sarah's uniform. "Your brother would be proud," he whispered as he hugged her afterward. Sarah touched the spot where Miguel's memorial tattoo lay hidden beneath her dress uniform. She had carried him with her through every challenge, every moment of doubt and pain. The angel wings on her back had become more than just a memorial. They were a symbol of the strength she had found in vulnerability, the courage she had discovered in openness. As she stood with her fellow graduates, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. She had started as the first woman to attempt SEAL training, carrying the weight of representing her entire gender. She was finishing as simply Petty Officer Martinez, a qualified SEAL operator ready to serve her country, alongside the elite warriors who had become her brothers. The tattoo that had once been her most carefully guarded secret had become the key to her acceptance and success. By revealing her deepest pain and most personal memorial, she had shown her teammates and instructors that true strength came not from hiding weakness, but from acknowledging it and continuing to fight anyway. Commander Mitchell approached her after the ceremony, extending his hand in congratulation. "Outstanding work, Martinez. Where do you want to serve?" Sarah thought for a moment about the teams and locations available to new SEAL graduates. She could request assignment to one of the prestigious East Coast teams, or seek deployment to an active combat zone where she could immediately put her training to use. "Wherever you think I can do the most good, sir," she said finally. "I'm ready for whatever comes next," Mitchell smiled. It was exactly the answer he had expected from her, and exactly the attitude that would serve her well in the challenging assignments that lay ahead. Sarah Martinez had proven herself as a warrior, but more importantly, she had proven herself as a teammate and a leader. The tattoo that had once made her feel vulnerable had ultimately become the symbol of her greatest strength. 6 months after graduation, Petty Officer Sarah Martinez found herself in a forward operating base in Syria, serving with SEAL Team 7. The assignment had come through faster than anyone expected, as ongoing operations in the Middle East created urgent need for qualified personnel. Sarah had volunteered immediately when the opportunity arose, eager to put her training to use in real-world conditions. The team she joined had initially been skeptical about receiving the first female SEAL, but her reputation had preceded her. Stories of her Hell Week performance and leadership during training had spread through the tight-knit special operations community. More importantly, several of her training classmates were already serving with other teams and had spread word about her capabilities and character. Team leader, Chief Petty Officer Marcus Cole had served 3 previous deployments in the region and was initially resistant to having his team become part of what he saw as a social experiment. But after watching Sarah perform during their first joint training exercises, his attitude quickly changed. "Forget everything you've heard about her being the first woman," he told his team after Sarah's first week with the unit. "She's just another operator and a damn good one. Treat her like you would any other teammate." The reality of combat deployment brought challenges that no training could fully prepare someone for. The living conditions were harsh, with teams of 8 operators sharing cramped quarters in heavily fortified compounds. Privacy was minimal, personal space non-existent, and the stress of constant readiness took its toll on everyone. Sarah adapted to deployment life with the same determination that had carried her through SEAL training. She established routines that allowed her to maintain some privacy for personal hygiene and changing clothes, but otherwise integrated seamlessly into the team's daily operations. Her teammates quickly learned to appreciate her dry sense of humor and her willingness to take on the less glamorous tasks that kept the team functioning. The angel wings tattoo that had once been her deepest secret was now something of a legend within the special operations community. During off-duty hours, when teams gathered for informal conversations, Sarah would sometimes share Miguel's story with new acquaintances. The tattoo had become a conversation starter, a way for other operators to share their own stories of loss and motivation. "My sister was killed by a drunk driver," Staff Sergeant Williams from the attached Army Special Forces unit told her one evening. "Got her name tattooed on my arm the day after her funeral. I understand why you carry your brother with you like that." These conversations created bonds that transcended service branches and backgrounds. The shared understanding of loss and the determination to honor fallen loved ones through service created a common ground that made Sarah's integration into the special operations community smoother than anyone had anticipated. Her first combat mission came 3 weeks into the deployment. Intelligence had identified a high-value target in a compound outside Raqqa, a weapons supplier who was providing explosive devices to insurgent groups throughout the region. The mission called for a night raid with minimal collateral damage, exactly the type of precision operation that SEALs specialized in. Sarah was assigned as the team's primary breacher, responsible for gaining entry to the target building. The role required both technical skill and physical courage, as the first person through a potentially defended entrance faced the greatest risk. Chief Cole's decision to give her this crucial position was a clear sign of his confidence in her abilities. The helicopter insertion went smoothly, with the team fast roping into a landing zone 2 kilometers from the target. They moved through the darkness with practiced silence, using night vision equipment to navigate the rocky terrain. Sarah carried the breaching charges and entry tools, her movements confident despite the weight of her equipment. As they approached the compound, Sarah studied the target building through her scope. Intelligence photos had shown a reinforced door that would require explosive entry, but she could see that the structure was older and possibly weaker than expected. She signaled to Chief Cole, suggesting an alternative entry point that might allow for a quieter approach. Cole studied her suggested route and nodded his approval. Sarah's tactical thinking was sound. If they could gain entry without explosives, they would maintain the element of surprise longer and reduce the risk of civilian casualties in nearby buildings. The modified plan worked perfectly. Sarah used manual tools to quickly defeat the lock mechanism on a side entrance, allowing the team to flow into the building without alerting the occupants. The target was taken into custody within minutes, along with a significant cache of weapons and intelligence materials. As they prepared for extraction, Sarah noticed something that hadn't appeared in their intelligence briefings. A young girl, maybe 8 years old, hiding in one of the back rooms. The child was terrified, probably awakened by the commotion and confused by the sight of armed strangers in her home. While the rest of the team secured the area and prepared the prisoner for transport, Sarah approached the girl slowly, removing her helmet and speaking in the limited Arabic she had learned during pre-deployment training. Her voice was gentle, her movements non-threatening as she tried to reassure the frightened child. "La tahaf," she said softly. "Don't be afraid." The girl stared at her with wide eyes, probably never having seen a female soldier before. Sarah reached into her kit and pulled out a small stuffed animal, a bear that her mother had given her for good luck. She had carried it through SEAL training and now, through her first deployment, a small reminder of home and family. She offered the bear to the girl, who took it hesitantly but seemed to relax slightly. The simple act of kindness from one human being to another transcended language barriers and cultural differences. Chief Cole watched this interaction with growing respect for his newest team member. Combat operations often focused on targets and objectives, but the best operators understood that they were dealing with real people in real communities. Sarah's instinctive compassion, combined with her tactical competence, marked her as someone who understood the broader implications of their missions. The extraction went smoothly, and the mission was classified as a complete success. The target provided valuable intelligence during interrogation, leading to additional operations that disrupted insurgent activities throughout the region. But for Sarah, The most meaningful moment had been the few minutes she spent reassuring a frightened child, showing that strength and gentleness could coexist. Over the following months, Sarah participated in dozens of operations across Syria and Iraq. Her reputation within the special operations community continued to grow, based not on her status as the first female SEAL, but on her consistent performance and reliability under pressure. She became known as an operator who could be counted on for both tactical excellence and sound judgment. The angel wings tattoo that had once made her feel vulnerable became a source of strength and connection. During medical checks and equipment maintenance, when parts of the tattoo were visible, it served as a conversation starter that helped her bond with local interpreters and civilian contractors who had also lost family members to violence. "Your brother, he would be proud of what you're doing," an Iraqi interpreter named Rashid told her after seeing Miguel's name during a medical examination. "You honor his memory by protecting others." These words from someone who understood loss intimately meant more to Sarah than any official commendation or performance evaluation. She was carrying Miguel with her into every mission, using his memory as motivation to be the best operator and teammate she could be. As her deployment neared its end, Chief Cole pulled Sarah aside for her final evaluation. They sat in the team's makeshift office, surrounded by maps and intelligence reports that told the story of their successful missions over the past 6 months. "Martinez, I'll be honest with you," Cole began. "When I heard I was getting the first female SEAL, I had my doubts. Not about your training or qualifications, but about how it would work with team dynamics and operational effectiveness." Sarah waited for him to continue, unsure whether this was leading toward praise or criticism. "You've exceeded every expectation," Cole said firmly. "You're one of the best operators I've ever served with, regardless of gender. Your tactical skills are outstanding, your judgment under pressure is solid, and your teammates trust you completely. That's the highest compliment I can give any SEAL." The formal evaluation would reflect this assessment, but the informal endorsement from a respected team leader meant even more. Sarah had proven that women could not only survive SEAL training, but excel in combat operations alongside the most elite warriors in the American military. As she prepared to return home and potentially train the next generation of SEAL candidates, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. The frightened girl from East LA who had hidden her brother's memorial tattoo was now a combat-tested special operations warrior whose ink had become a symbol of strength rather than vulnerability. Miguel's angel wings had carried her through every challenge, every moment of doubt, every test of courage and character. What had started as a private memorial to a lost brother had become a testament to the power of turning pain into purpose, vulnerability into strength, and personal loss into service to others. The first female SEAL was heading home, but she was no longer defined by being first. She was simply Petty Officer Martinez, a warrior who had proven that the heart of a true operator wasn't measured by gender or background, but by the willingness to carry others' memories, protect others' futures, and never leave a teammate behind.